right, that's on the way. So again, welcome. My name is Mark Seefts. I'm the development manager for Apex. Today we're going to talk about the Apex 19.1 early adopters. This early adopter program has been launched on Tuesday this week. If you're familiar with Apex, you know that this is the point in our development cycle where we get closer to the release and where we are ready to share our new features with the community and to have you try it out and get your feedback. Today we're going to demonstrate some of the major new features that we're introducing. We have Karsten, Christina, Hilary, and Shakib do some demonstrations. And then at the end, we'll go over some of your questions. Second, there you go. Apex 19.1 is not out yet. So as always, we have our safe harbor statement here. Everything can still change. We can change our mind on certain features. So please don't make any purchasing decisions just yet. Now, if you haven't tried out the Apex EA release yet, you can go to apexea.org.com. We launched this on Tuesday afternoon Eastern Time, and in the first 36 hours or so, we had about 500 registrations already. And let me just go there real quick so you can all see how that works. I'll switch over to my browser. There you go. So you go to apexea.org.com. On this page, you'll find some information, what are the new features, and what are some of the known issues. And then you can click here on sign in. And then you log in with your Oracle account. Almost there. Okay, good. All right, and then you can click down here on the blue button, request a new workspace, and then there's a quick wizard for you to step through. The email is defaulted to your Oracle account. This our demo, whatever you want to call your workspace. On the next step, you're being asked a few questions, a brief survey. Everybody's trying it now. So please fill out the survey. Then you get to the agreement and hit next, and then you can request your workspace, submit your request, you'll receive an email, and in that email there's a link to create your workspace, and once you've done that, you're good to go trying out Apex 19.1. All right, going back to my slides. I just want to spend a few minutes on our release naming and naming scheme. If you've been using Apex for a while, you know we've been around for a while. Last year, we switched our naming convention to follow many other Oracle products having the year in the version number. So Apex 18.1 and 18.2 were released last year. The .1 and .2 does not refer to the quarter. It's the version within the year. So 18.1 was released in May. 18.2 came out in September. And we're now planning to release Apex 19.1. We don't have a specific release date yet to communicate, but we're getting close. One thing that we no longer do are quarterly patches. In the past, we had quarterly patches, Apex 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. We switched to releasing full releases instead. There were two main reasons for that switch. One is having a full release requires a lot less downtime when upgrading. A full release installation installs a new Apex schema, and you can switch to the new schema at the very end, whereas a patch in the past, especially on hosted instances, cloud instances, required longer outages to compile all the PLC packages. And the other reason is it enables us to come out with new features more frequently. Patches in the past did not include new features. Full releases do. And of course, the benefit for everyone is that full releases are available on OTN. So rather than having to go to Oracle support for downloading a patch, you can download the full release of OTN and upgrade your existing instances. We do have PSEs, so if there are any major bugs being found, we make PSEs available on Oracle support. And unlike in the past, these PSE or patch set exceptions are now bundled PSEs, so they include all bug fixes for a given release. We updated our statement of direction, and on this page, you'll also find more information about our naming convention and PSEs. So let me just share this again. Where's my browser? Bear with me. There you go. We updated our statement of direction, listing the features being introduced with Apex 19.1, as well as what's planned for Apex 19.2. And then at the very end, you'll find more detailed information about what I just talked about in terms of versioning. Okay, and then last item on my list before I hand it over. Our agenda. So we're going to have Shakib start with talking about the application builder, dark mode, and the user theme. Then we're going to have Carsten Zarski talk about form regions and the REST enabled forms. Then Christina is going to show us the new data loading. And Hilary Farrell is going to talk about our upgrade of Oracle Jet and new Jet chart types. Okay, and lastly, one shameless plug. I'm going to do another webinar later today. In 2 hours from now at 12, we're going to talk about interfacing with open data from Apex, basically demonstrating our 18.2 new features and REST integration. And I'm going to put this into the chat. And now I'm going to hand it over to Shakib. Put my share, and Shakib, you should be able to share now. Can you try?
Right. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for joining this office hour session. So first I'd like to start off with talking to you about dark mode, which is really a whole new visual experience for the Apex builder. And the goal behind dark mode is that it should provide a darker inverted color scheme which can reduce eye strain and is especially helpful for developers that are developing late into the night. Now, we know that several other platforms are also picking up, dark mode. Mac OS recently announced it, and now other applications and platforms are also picking up dark mode and allowing developers to use, whatever tool they want in a light mode or dark mode capacity. So we thought that, we wanted to, be a part of this trend and allow our Apex developers to also have a dark mode user interface. So it's really simple. Once you log into the builder, to activate dark mode, simply go into your user menu, and you'll see this new toggle right here, dark mode. And currently, it's on. There's a small bug in EA, but when you go in for the first time, you'll see this dark mode toggle. If you just toggle that on, what will happen is the builder page will refresh, whatever page that you're on, and immediately you'll be in dark mode. From here, you can really go about your day using Apex just as you would in any other situation, right? So you can go in, click around anywhere you want. You can even go into Page Designer, shared components, anywhere at all in the builder, and this new UI will be there. And let's say that you decide you don't want to be in dark mode anymore. It's fairly simple, just toggle back, right? You just go back to your user menu and toggle that setting back off. Toggling the setting will be remembered for your user account across sessions. So let's say you're to sign out, sign back in, that will be remembered. I believe that is a known issue for the early adopter right now. So if you have dark mode toggled on, it will not be remembered the next time you sign in, but that will be resolved in the production release. It's not just the colors that have changed, however. It's a lot more than that. So really, to build dark mode, what that requires is for us to go through the entire style sheets for Apex and really make everything variable driven. So every shade of gray, every link text, every color that's used in the builder is then assigned a variable, and then we are using the same thing that we do in Universal Theme, which is really to apply a theme style to the builder. And what we've done then is kind of inverted or provided alternative colors that will provide this darker look and feel. So beyond just the colors, also there's new icons here. You may have noticed these. So if you notice, the icons also change when you toggle between the dark mode and the light mode. And you'll see even more refinements in the production release for icons and really generally all throughout the Apex Builder experience. We have seen a number of good feedback already coming in about dark mode glitches here and there, and we've already fixed a number of these things in development. But if you do see other issues with dark mode, please do let us know. We do read every single comment in the feedback, and we'll make it a priority to fix any of these issues so that you can really use dark mode to its fullest extent. The next thing I want to talk to you about while I'm still in dark mode is the universal theme and the improvements universal theme. So for 19.1, the major theme, the major goal for us for universal theme is to provide a number of refinements, mobile improvements, and accessibility improvements. So what I'll do is I'll first show you the universal theme sample application, which has also been updated. And there's a few new things that I want to talk to you about. Firstly, with accessibility, we're now using the main element for the main contents of the page. And also there's a new tab skip to main content that's the first tab stop. So if you're using some kind of assistive technology, you can immediately jump to the main content of the page just by clicking tab and hitting enter. And now you're placed into the body. You can skip all the navigation and other areas which are repeated across pages. There's a few other new things as well. So there's a new navigation style right here. So if you notice the left side menu, it looks a little bit different. The icons are a little bit larger. The style is a little bit different. I'll run this customer tracker application to give you a better idea of what some of the changes look like. So here, as I navigate around, you'll notice that I'm using this different style A for the navigation menu right here. And there's a small color indicator right here. The icons are slightly bigger. The badge styles are a little bit different. But in addition to that, we also have another style. So if I go into Apex really quickly, and let's go and change that user interface attribute. So interfaces. And right here, you'll see style A, style B, and classic. Now, when you upgrade your universal theme, just by going through and refreshing that theme, by default, we will not update your existing applications to use a new style. However, new applications will be created within this style A. I can try style B just to show you what it looks like. And if I refresh now in the customer tracker application, you'll see that it looks slightly different. The active tab is now highlighted prominently in the accent color, but the sub tabs, so if I go to the categories page, you'll notice that they are now in a darker color of the same background. The other thing is in Theme Roller, there's a number of new properties to change and fine tune these colors. So now you're able to declaratively set the badge color or the accent color for the navigation. Another small thing you might notice is there's a new animation for this hamburger menu. So as you close or expand this, you'll see a small animation. Something else as well is for mobile users. If you are using universal theme applications on a very small screen device, you'll notice that the breadcrumbs will now only show you one level above. So let's say I go into a page that's a few levels deep. Well, this is fine for right now. So let's say I'm in here and I use a mobile screen, right? So I'll just emulate that using this. What'll happen is, as my screen gets small, now the administration link will have a back button. Regardless of how many items are in my breadcrumbs, we will only show you the one immediately before the current page. So it's a really easy way to go back to the previous page that you came from. And in addition to this, there's a number of new features for the collapsible region. So now you can change the direction of the icons. You can put them to the end of the region or before. You can change the arrows themselves to be plus or minus icons. There's new styles for the navigation bar as well. So then there's new menu styles here, which will also be consistent throughout all of the menus in Universal Theme. So not only will you have the same look and feel in the navigation bar, but also in the navigation menu, and interactive grids and reports. And I believe some of those features will be in the production release, not in the early adopter. There's one more thing I want to show you, and that is an improvement in the builder. So let's say I'm trying to modify this list in Apex. So I can go into Quick Edit and simply click on this region. And when I'm in Page Designer, I want to go and modify this list. So I can click on this and click on Edit List. And let's say I want to modify the Flex Columns item, which is this. Previously, it was really difficult to know exactly which custom attribute you should populate to get the description, the title, if there's any other attributes. Now in Apex 19, as you scroll down, this user-defined attribute section is slightly updated. So previously, you'd have to go to list all the theme attributes, and you'd pick your theme in the template, and it would tell you which list attribute 1 mapped to exactly what in the template. Now it's all right here in the label. So because this is using a media list, I know this is the description, the badge value, the link attributes, link, item classes, link class, and so on. And if this same list were to be referenced in other locations in your application, you'll see a counter of how many references there are, and that the one with the most references will be selected immediately. Also, if I change this, you'll notice that the labels will automatically refresh to show you exactly what these custom attributes correspond to. So that's just a very simple and brief update on dark mode and universal theme. I think you'll notice a lot of tweaks throughout universal theme. And I do encourage you to explore the universal theme sample application. There's a few new components such as inline pop-ups and a few other things as well. So I encourage you to take a look, and please do submit feedback. We do listen to every comment. That's all I have, Mark. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Shakib. So then next up, we're going to have Carsten talk about forms and REST. Carsten, can you try sharing your screen?
Hello, everybody. My screen. So I hope everybody can see my screen okay.
Working good.
And yeah, I would like to talk to you about changes in the Apex release 19.1 for forms. And the overall development goal was to provide forms which support RESTful services and REST-enabled SQL, or to continue the support of external data sources. We started with Apex 18. During development, it turned out that forms get a lot of more new features, which I hope you find interesting. And to give you an insight into that, I will start with creating a form, but not on a RESTful service right now. Let's start with a simple local table. So let's do the classic mDept example, and let's just create a form. And we start with creating a page. And we will pick a form page, of course. And for a demo, it's best to use a report with form, so we can click the create button to get a blank form to create a new row, and we can also delete and edit existing ones. So that makes it pretty easy. And here you see the first change in the create form page wizard. No, you don't see that here. You will see that on the next page. So this is the usual page, which allows you to provide names for your report and form pages. For the form page, we can decide whether this is to be a normal page or a modal dialog, and we can pick the report implementation, which for us should be interactive report or classic report. Interactive grid is the last component which doesn't support external data sources yet. So that works exactly as it worked in previous releases. Interactive and classic report, those implementations are new. Okay, so we stick with an interactive report. We want to have the navigation menu entry. And here comes the new thing. As for classic reports, interactive reports, calendars, charts, we now can not only pick a table, we can pick a data source and a query type. And for now, I would like to stay with a local database. And a form on a table was always possible, right? That's not new. However, that is new. Right, we can now create a form directly on a SQL query, and I will create a form on that SQL query. So we will select a few columns from the end table, and then hit next. Again, we have to pick a primary key, of course. I will pick the emp no column, or for the emp. If I'm in a database, it might be even more interesting to work with the row ID as the primary key. So let's add that here. Now we can pick the row ID, and let's finally create the form. Page Designer redirects us to the report page with the columns, and the next page will be the form page. And before having a closer look into what Apex generated for us, let's try this form out. Of course, we can't directly run the modal, so go back to the report page, run that. Log in And here is my report, and we can open the form and edit an existing entry and do a tiny change, for instance, that pretty much looks similar to what we had in earlier releases, except the tiny fact that we created this form on a SQL query and not on a table, right? And when we look at the page, then we see that a form now looks a bit different on an Apex page, right? How was that in previous Apex versions and up to Apex 18? What was a form? A form was a standard region on the page, static HTML, but any other region. Then we had page items scattered over the page or in one region. And the actual form component were the two processes, right? We had this fetch process in the pre-rendering section, and we had the DML process in the processing section. And that actually made up the form. The rest was just a page with items, right? And that is now different, right? We have that region. And the region, you can see it with the icon here, is a special type of region. It's a form region, right? So that is a separate entity now. And the form region contains all relevant settings regarding the data source. And like it was for reports, charts, calendars in 18, we now can have local remote database or web source as the location. We have, no, that's what we have a query type, which is either table, SQL query, or PL SQL function returning SQL query. So you get a lot of flexibility here. And you have the page items, which when I look at the Emplo page item, for instance, when you then scroll down to the source section, the page item references the form region, contains information about the column and the data type, and whether it's a primary key or whether it's a query-only form item. Talking about items and regions, we now have actually two region assignments, right? This is the data source assignment. So this tells the item where the data comes from, or we could call it the data binding, right? And still, when we look at the layout section, there is still that region as it was in all the years before. This tells Apex or tells us where the item is to be positioned on the screen, right? So an item can still be anywhere on the screen, but for these new forms, items will reference the region and will get its data source information from there. The same thing is for the processes. So also the DML process references the form region, and the fetch process also references the form region, right? So this has been cleaned up. We don't have that situation anymore that our table setting is replicated to the fetch and the DML process. And if I want to change it, I have to think about, I always have to make sure that I change it at both places. This is all over now. We just have one place where this is configured, and that is the form region. And if we have that form region in Page Designer, Page Designer can also leverage that. So what would happen if we add an item? So I change the SQL query. And as I leave that text field, you can see Page Designer automatically created a page item for us, right? So that makes it way more easy to add items to forms. Page Designer can do some stuff for us here. Same goes if I remove a query from a column from the SQL query, then Page Designer removes the item as well, right? So that allows or we think that makes working with forms much more easy, right? And also metadata-wise, how do we organize the form metadata is much more coherent now in Apex 19 since we have that form region. Okay, when we have that form region and we now have those data source attributes, it should now be very straightforward to also use web source modules, right, and RESTful services. And I have prepared a RESTful service before this office hour session. And let's have a brief look into the REST API we want to use now, right? And for a form, which REST API shall we use for a form? So the REST API should be able to provide data, but also it has also to accept manipulation requests, right? In a form, we want to change data. So we need a REST API which support the post method to add data, the put method to replace data, and the delete method to delete data, right? And in that case, I have prepared a REST API for the sample test table. So that is one of the Apex sample data sets. And then I simply went ahead and REST enabled that table. So I used the auto REST feature, simply executing the auth.enable object procedure, and then auth created a complete REST API for that table for me. So we now have that URL. So, and we can see we have a URL prefix, and then the sample task URL then allows me to get all the data, or we can execute post, put, and delete requests, and we will now try that out. So again, let's go to the application and create a new form and report page. And again, we create a page, and we again choose report with form. Again, let's have the interactive report. That's nice, right? And let's start the task overview. I did this before. And then let's have edit task. And I would like to do a modal again. And that is the same as you've already seen. Yes, I want to have a navigation menu entry. And the data source dialog now allows me to pick a web source for my new form and report pages. I should create the web source, the new web source beforehand. So that's of course what I didn't do. So let's do that now. Go to shared components, and then web source modules. And whenever we want to work with a RESTful service, we need to create a web source module beforehand. Apex needs to know how the web source, how the REST API works. So this is an auth REST API. So this is sample tasks, and I just paste the URL here. Almost there. So it splits up the URL into a server part and a service part. That's not new. That has been in Apex 18 as well. No authentication, and then we can discover our RESTful API, and now Apex will fetch data from the RESTful service. It will fetch the catalog from the RESTful service and see which JSON attributes are there, how the response data looks like, and which attributes there are there, and how to map those to columns, right? Okay, so then let me create the report at the form again. Right, now we can use that. And again, I want to have a navigation menu entry. And now we can click on web source. And now we can pick a web source module. It offers the columns of that web source module. And here is one issue which is only on the early adopter release. You can see the created and updated columns are actually date columns, which were not detected correctly. That's already fixed in development. So on production, you will see that it's all correctly and nicely discovered. On the early adopter, we have, it's not accurately discovered. For this demo, that's okay. You can always, of course, go into the details of the web source module and adjust these things. But as I said, that's only a temporary issue on the early adopter release. Okay, for every form, also when it's based on a RESTful service, we have to pick a primary key. Also for RESTful service, to decide whether a row has to be created or updated, we need one attribute to identify that row. And so also when the REST API is not pointing to a relational database, but to something else, you always need a unique identifier, or as we call it, a primary key. And we will take the ID column for that. And again, it created our form and report pages. Let's have a look at the form page again in Page Designer. And we can see this is a form region. And now it points to a web source module. The module is here. And we can configure all the other attributes which are there for web source modules. And the items, again, when I look at the P7 task name attribute, and I'm looking up the source section, we can see again it's assigned to a form region, assigned to a column, and that's also a nice improvement compared to earlier to previous forms. We now don't have to type the column name anymore. We are offered a select list, which is derived from the form region again. Right, and we have the information whether this is a primary key or a query-only column, and so on. Okay, let's run that page. And the report will show us, as we would expect, an overview on the existing data. Oh, that doesn't look too nice, so let's hide that for now. And we can then open the forum, and you can see it. It's a bit of a latency, so it has to do an HTTP request to the REST API to load that data. And now I'm just deleting a row, right? Let's double check again. That was this with the real server requirements. Let's remove that. And again, we have a bit of a latency because of HTTP request and reaching out to the REST API, getting back, coming back from the REST API, and now our row is gone, right? So you can see it's creating a report in the form, so a simple application which allows us to maintain that data, to review data, to change data, create new data, delete data, not on a table, on an external REST API, but without any code, right? That's how so you see how the direction we are taking for Apex and external data sources. We want you to get the same experience as you have for tables. We want to provide the same experience for REST APIs. Of course, the real world is very colorful and different, and you might have REST APIs which don't provide delete endpoints. Other REST APIs don't provide put endpoints. Another REST API accepts a different JSON format you have to send, and depending on what you have, you will there might be a bit of manual configuration. But the simple cases, right? REST API with all those 4 endpoints is straightforward and all declarative. And that concludes my presentation. I hand back to Mark.
All right, thank you, Carsten. That's great. So next up, we have Christina to show us the new payload.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So let me show you another new feature in Apex 19.1. Can everyone see my screen okay?
That was good.
All right. So the new data load wizard is available under SQL Workshop, Utilities, and Data Workshop. And when you click Load Data, you can see that the wizard has enhanced user interface with drag and drop file interface. And also it supports more file types than before. We always had an interface to upload a CSV file before, but now you can upload a native XLX file, XML, or JSON file to load and create a table. You can choose to upload a file or copy and paste the data. If you choose copy and paste option, the wizard currently supports only comma-separated or tab-delimited files. But if you upload a file, it supports more file types. So let's try uploading a file with a CSV format. So I have this CSV file that contains movies information. When you drag and drop, the wizard parses out and detects column delimiter automatically, and it parsed first 200 rows to sample the column data types. If the preview does not look correct, you can always adjust these settings. For example, if your file does not contain column headers as the first line, you can uncheck this option. Apex assumes your CSV columns are enclosed with double quotes, but you can adjust that. UTF-8 file encoding is used by default, but if you contain other character set in your file, you can change that option as well. When you click Configure, you can preview more information about the file. So if you have a larger file data set, you can get more preview information under the Preview tab. When you click Columns to Load tab, you can get more insights about the columns. Notice that by default, Apex sampled first 200 rows, but for larger data sets, it might make sense to increase this number to get more accurate column data types. If you uncheck certain columns here in the UI, this gets excluded when the data gets loaded. And also, Apex detects almost everything automatically, so there is no need for you to manually select column data types, enter format mask, or enter a decimal or group separator. For date, number, or timestamp columns, format masks are automatically detected. And for each number columns, group separator and decimal characters are detected automatically. So if you're satisfied with these settings, you can save these changes. And you can come to the main window to enter a new table name for this file. So let's enter movies as the table name. Next one is the arrow table. Arrow table gets used to save any of the rows that cannot be inserted in the target table. And this arrow table is actually a real Oracle database table. So after the load, if any of the rows fail, you can always query this table to get more information or view it in the SQL workshop. If your load succeeds without any failure, this arrow table will be dropped automatically at the end of the wizard. For Oracle Database 12c or higher, you can generate the primary key using either sequential identity column or globally unique syscoid ID. Also, if you're not sure about your data, then you can uncheck this option to ignore any of the automatic parsed out column data types. If you do, all of the columns will be created as varchar2 4000. So let's try loading this data by clicking Load Data button. When you do, the load is actually executing in the background job. So if you're actually loading a large file, you can dismiss this dialog, but load will still continue behind the scene for you. So table has created fine without any issues, and over 9,000 rows has been loaded. And at the end of the wizard, you have an option to view the table or continue to create an application using this new table. Let's try another load. And this time, let's try some file that fails so I can show you how wizard behaves. Let's name this as another table name and try the load. The wizard shows nice indicator saying how many rows has been processed. And at the end of the wizard, if the row fails, it shows nice error message. And also, the rejected row gets saved in the arrow table that you define. The wizard shows only first 10 rows in this dialog. But if you have more than 10 rows that failed during the load, you can always open it in the object browser to view more detailed information. Or if you want to drop this table to try reload again, you can click on drop and reload to go into the data load wizard again. Let's try another file load. This time, let's try native Excel file. Wizard recognize the native Excel file fine. And also, if you have a multiple worksheet, Apex uses the first worksheet by default to parse out the data, but you always have a select list option, so you can upload another worksheet if you want to and create a table on this. Okay, so it's loading native Excel file fine and everything worked out without any issues. Let's try XML or JSON file load. XML and JSON file load works very similar way. If you have a flat structure XML or JSON file, Data Load Wizard takes in that file and parses out that information. And you can always create a table on this and proceed with the wizard. This new Data Load Wizard is not only available from SQL Workshop, but also we have integrated this wizard in Create Application Wizard. So if you go to Create App, the option, what we used to call from Create App from Spreadsheet is now called Create Application from a File, because when you click this, it goes into the new Load Wizard where you can upload many different file types than before and create a real Oracle database or real Oracle database table and create a nice looking application using that new table in minutes. Another one I wanted to show you is the parser logic that's used within this new data load wizard is also available as a public API, and it's called Apex Data Parser Package. So if you want to implement your own processing of same CSV, native Excel, XML, or JSON files, you can take advantage of this public supported API. So let me show you example of how you can use this. First, let's go to a website where you can download sample XLX file here. And let's open up this file to see what it contains. As you can see, it has 1,000 rows and few columns in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Apex Data Parser Package. And what I'll do is I'm going to request the same file that I just downloaded through the URL directly, and then use discover function to get the column profile information, and then turn that column profile as a table so I can query column information contained within that file. So let's run this query under SQL Workshop. When you run, as you can see, column information displays, and let's compare with the file that we just downloaded. And as you can see, the first one was empty, so parser named it arbitrarily as column 001. But next one, first name, last name, gender, with the data type automatic detection has been done. You can also parse out the file content to get the data. And here's next query I'll use. Let's run this in SQL Workshop, and this time we'll parse out the data by requesting that file directly from a URL. When you do, all these columns are parsed out and it shows that you can query this information. And let's compare with the file we downloaded. And you can see that first name, last name, and other column informations are correctly parsed out. Another one I wanted to show you is if you want to implement the use cases of using Apex Data Parser Package, we have included some of the samples in sample data loading applications. So if you have not tried out and installed sample data loading, please go ahead and install sample data loading. One example we have in that app is parsing out of files. So let's upload what we had in the wizard, XML file. and click upload. And this app is actually using Apex Data parser package parse function to display all these column information. And also it's discovering all these columns within that file through the usage of public API. Another example in that app is copying, pasting this comma separated data. But this time, it's not gonna actually create a new table and load the data into the new table. But when you load this data, it's updating existing table. So the rows that I just pasted over got updated in the existing table, and it had a failed row, and failed row got logged in the error table. And the content of the logic that's used is actually a simple insert statement, and it's actually showing what insert statement it used to make that happen behind the scenes. Another one, which is really nice, is Karsten actually posted a nice blog post regarding this. So if you want to find out more information about the data parser logic or learn more about the new data loading wizard, go ahead and check out his blog post and get more information. And also, if you have not tried out this new feature, go ahead and sign up a workspace in our EA instance and try out and let us know through the feedback. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Everybody, could you please ensure you're on mute? I didn't want to cut off Christina there, but please ensure you're all on mute. So next up, we have Hillary talking about Oracle Jet.
Great, thanks, Mark. Okay, and hopefully you can see my screen. So first place I want to start off with is the main Apex EA page. So I just want to jump into the features page for those of you that may not have seen this. Here you'll get a high-level overview of the features and functionality that have been added, and I just want to highlight the version changes of the Jet and associated third-party libraries that we've integrated into 19.1. So we've uptaken the latest Jet release, which is 6.10, and its associated jQuery and jQuery UI library changes. Those are just dot release changes, so thankfully no breaking changes related with those uptakes. And underneath that, you will see an outline of the new features and functionality that are specific to Jet charts in this release. So let's delve into that in a little bit more detail. And the best point to start off with is in the sample charts application. If you haven't got this installed already, use the App Gallery Sample Apps point and select the sample charts application, which I already have installed, and you can simply run it from there as well. What I've added in this release is this new in 19.1 link at the top here, and that's available in the reference section. If you weren't aware, we have a reference section at the bottom of the navigation menu on the left. And selecting that link will bring you to a list of a number of examples of the new features and functionality that I've added in here. Also to note that the links to the Jet documentation in the EA version of sample charts currently redirect to Jet 6.0, but that's already been updated in development for our production to ensure they go to 6.1. So for the status meter gauge, that's a new chart type that we've added declarative support for. And essentially it's a replacement for the old Jet dial gauge chart type, which is no longer supported. And we've added a number of additional declarative attributes for controlling the font formatting and the stack grouping of stacked charts, as well as the exposure of a number of new tooltip options for Gantt charts. So let's take a look firstly at the status meter gauge. And those of you who are already using JetCharts and are familiar with the apex.world may have already seen the plugin that's already available in there in the community. So we're happy that we now have this declarative support built in and available in 19.1. As I mentioned, it is a replacement for the old dial gauge chart type. So if your applications contain that old chart type, we will automatically convert that over to a new status meter gauge of orientation circular for a similar look and feel. We support circular, horizontal, and vertical rendering of this chart. And if you take a look at the various examples, I've included information regions below the examples to highlight the page designer attributes that have been used to control the appearance of the various examples that are being demonstrated. So if we take a look at this particular one, for example, in page designer, let's just get rid of that. There we go. In page designer at chart level, we have the new chart type status meter gauge. And again, you'll see it dial gauge is no longer an option here. Once you've selected that chart type, you do have a number of new attributes available to you. I just want to highlight the importance of the layout options for this particular chart type. It does essentially render as a smaller chart type in comparison with the other charts that we declaratively support. So it is important to define a maximum width and height depending on your requirements to ensure that the sizing of the chart is appropriate in your app. So take a look at the various examples that I've included on this particular page and see how you can control the appearance there. There's a new group here, gauge, that essentially has all the attributes that you'll need to be focusing on. And let's just open the help section here in the center. The orientation is the one that you choose, the orientation, whether it's circular, horizontal, or vertical. The show plot area, if we can go back to the chart, let me just minimize this guy so I can show you. The plot area is this gray section of the chart, and you can control whether that's visible or not. The indicator size is essentially that red element on this chart, and you control the ratio of that in relation to the plot area. So the smaller that amount is set to, then the smaller that appears in relation to the plot. The inner radius controls the sizing of the inner semicircle or circle, depending on the size of gauge that you render. The smaller that value is, then the smaller the radius will be visible here. And the start angle and angle extent are what you use to control whether you want a full circle or this semicircle rendered for the gauge, or indeed what angle you want the gauge to be rendered at. At the series level, these options are very similar to what was available already for the dial gauge chart. So for the column mappings, if we take a look there, you have the value and minimum and maximum attributes or column mappings are available. You don't have to define the minimum if you wish to, but it is available if you wish to use it. In terms of appearance, you can declaratively change the color of the indicator, as well as that plot area, that gray area that I showed on the chart there. So you can very easily change things like that depending on your requirements. And the other options that are quite interesting and helpful, hopefully you'll find, are the ability to define thresholds and reference lines on your gauge. So if we take a look back at the other, let's have a look here, come out of my Zoom. Yep, at the other chart types here, we have a thresholds example here. So you can control the appearance if you want to define specific areas or regions on the chart to highlight specific thresholds. And that particular attribute can support hard-coded values if you wish, which are actually in use on that particular example. Let's just take a look at that example. down in the threshold section here. But as you'll see in the item level help, you can reference a page item or indeed a column from your chart source if you wish to utilize them for defining the values as well as the colors that are associated with the thresholds. And similarly, you can do the same for reference lines that are visible on the gauge. And the reference lines example is this particular one here that I used at the start. So take a look at the examples I have on that page, and hopefully you'll find it a nice alternative to the, I guess, chart type that was fairly modest was the dial gauge chart. Now let's take a look at a few of the other options that we've included. And these are the declarative attributes. This one here is for better control over the formatting of the labels and values text that are visible on your chart. And I have this example here, which could be considered potentially quite crude because of the color schemes. This may not exactly be something that you'd want in your own, but this is purely for demonstration purposes to highlight these new options. So the text of the title, the labels, the values, as well as the legend text can be declaratively changed. And the easiest way to see what options are available there are when you're in Page Designer for your given chart, filter on the word font, and at chart level we can see the options available for controlling the legend text. At series level, the options for controlling the values, which would be these numbers, that text that's displayed here, the 50, the 36. And then at axis level, we have the ability to define or control the fonts and the styling for the title, as well as the tick labels. And the tick labels are these values here, apples, bananas, and on the x-axis, or indeed the y-axis of your chart, depending on the axis that you select here. Next up, we have an example of and just to highlight the reference page there, where you can get to the same new in 19.1. We have options for controlling stack grouping. And this has come up a couple of times on the OTN forum. And these options now mean that you no longer have to utilize custom JavaScript code to set the stack label visibility, which is this total information that's displayed on top of the stack, or define multiple stacks on your stack chart, which is what you're seeing here. And how that is achieved is through two new attributes, the first of which is at chart level. Let's filter on stack. So once stack is set to yes for your chart, and you'll have this new stack label attribute, which by default is set to no, and you can easily change that so you have that useful information visible on top of the series. And then if I wish to render multiple stacks on my chart, at series level, we have a new stack category attribute. And here I want to have my Store A and Acme Store series rendered on the one stack. So I've given them the same stack name. And my third series has a different stack name. And that controls the visibility of those chart types on different stacks. And then last but not least are changes in Gantt charts, particularly around the tooltip handling, as well as a number of other bug fixes that I haven't listed on the features page. If we edit the Gantt chart region, again at a chart level, filter on tooltip. And prior to 19.1, you would have only been presented with a yes/no option, the show option here. Now you have a number of new options that give you the ability to control which piece of information you want visible in that Gantt tooltip. Or as an alternative, you could also define a custom tooltip. And using another example on this page, at series level, in my series source, I've just defined a custom tooltip there, and I'm referencing the column in the custom tooltip column mappings. And when that chart So in this particular one, that was the first example. So you see no row information or baseline information rendered. And then my multiple tasks, if I choose a date range for this particular chart, and there you see my custom tooltip is displayed. So that's just a high-level overview of the new features and functionality that have been included, but there are a number of bug fixes that have also been added in there, some small things such as the behavior of the maximize option, and that is now functioning correctly to resize the chart accordingly. So that's it from the JET side of things. I'll hand it back to you, Mark.
All right, thanks, Laurie. That's great. All right, before we end the call, I just want to go through some of the questions that I picked up from the chat. And let me just go back to sharing my screen here. So if you want to sign up for the EA, here's UL again. And the question that I wanted to touch on, going back to the very beginning when I talked about having Apex 18.1, 18.2, 19.1 and such, those are always full releases, and the question was whether there's always going to be a new schema, and the answer is yes. Each one of these new releases comes with its own Apex _ 18, 19, and such schemas. There was a question about the dark mode, if you can use the dark mode in your own applications. The dark mode is the Builder UI or the Apex UI. In your own application, use the theme, and you can use a theme roller to create your own different styles. There was a question about the sign up on the EA site. So if you have any troubles getting emails, the email should be sent out immediately. So there shouldn't be any long wait. So let us know if that is not the case. There was a question on supporting REST, like REST-enabled SQL and web sources for interactive grids. That is planned for the future. It's not going to be 19.1, but we certainly want to add that as well. And then Carsten, there was one question about your web source example, looking at how you put in the URI, like the whole URL, into your web source definition. The question about what happens when you deploy this to other instances, prod, UAT, QA, and the domain or the host may be different, how to handle that.
Yeah, you might remember that when I created the web source module, that the second step was talking about a remote server. And so Apex stores the endpoint URL in two parts. So the first part, which is typically the host name, the port, and the first part of the URL of the context path, that is stored as the remote server object, and the rest is stored as the service part within the web source modules. And multiple web source modules can utilize the same remote server object. So when we now move an application from test to production or from development to test, then we can just change the remote server object, and all web sources which reference that remote server will automatically adjust. Also, remote servers have prompt on install properties. So if that is set to yes, and you move an application by export import from, again, development to test, you will be prompted for to change the remote server object if required. And if you do, then of course all web source modules will use the new remote server. So that's actually what Apex already is prepared for.
Right, great, thank you. Another question was about exporting, especially from interactive grids and interactive reports, whether there's always ever going to be an native Excel export, and that's planned for the future as well. Nothing specific to announce there yet. Another question was whether Apex is always going to be free. Apex is a no-cost option of the database and will remain that way, always has been. And then, Christina, there was a question or a few questions discussed on the data loading. What you had shown, the Excel upload that was based on native XLSX files, right? Not XLX, XLSX files, right? The newer format.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so just want to clarify that. That's the XLSX file that is supported. Another question was about the data load wizard, like in your own application. We don't have that yet, right?
Right. So that is on our roadmap. It's not available as a built-in component within your application, so you can add it in your own application, but it's not there yet. It's only available through our builder.
All right. And then a question about XLSX. Do you support multiple sheets in your XLSX files?
Yes. So the parser logic detects XLX files. If it has multiple worksheets, it knows how to deal with it. And also there is an API. You can specifically pass specific sheet to be parsed and load the data. So we support that.
Okay, awesome. And then lastly, you've shown loading into an existing table with the PL/SQL API. Is that also something that the Wizard supports?
Wizard does not support uploading to an existing table yet, but you can certainly hand code your custom logic within your application. The functionality is there, but we haven't added within our builder yet.
All right, that's good, thank you. And then question about Internet Explorer support, that is still supported. Our release notes and documentation states Microsoft Edge and the previous one, which is IE 11. So if you find any issues there, please send us feedback, for example, through the EA feedback functionality. And the last on my list, Shakib, not sure if you're still on, but a question about Font Apex and Font Awesome. And why Font Apex? Why not just Font Awesome? He may not want to be on. Well, it was replied to in the chat, and both are still, you can still choose to support both of them, and we chose Font Apex for our UT and Builder because it stylistically fit in better. All right, that's all the questions I kind of noted down. Any of the other speakers, Christina, Carsten, Hillary, Shakib, any other questions that you came across that you want to talk about?
Yeah, there was one question which I have seen in the chat, which was asked quite a few times, and that was about OAuth 2 authentication for web source modules. And I would like to add a few generic points on that. One specific issue is already resolved. That's already noted in the chat as well. But again, the basic thing about OAuth 2 is when you execute a web source module, the REST service is actually invoked on the database side. So the database running Apex invokes the RESTful service for you, right? And that means if an authentication is done, the database has to authenticate. And whenever an OAuth authentication flow involves a browser redirect, this cannot work, right? A web source module can't, the database can't do a browser redirect for you. And for that reason, OAuth 2 is supported, but only the client credentials flow, which is explicitly without browser redirect. Some people refer to that as a two-legged flow because it's just the database in that case, which authenticates to the RESTful service. And when you are about to integrate a REST API and the authentication is OAuth, watch out for the words two-legged authentication or client credentials authentication flow. That's the one you want to use with Apex.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, just one last note on Apex, ea.oracle.com for anyone interested. And I guess to Carsten's point, we are using the 18.3 database, and we're also using OAuth 18.4 that may affect some of the REST APIs that you may try to interface with. All right, so with that, thanks everyone for joining. We have our next office hours coming up in 2 weeks. And you'll find the recording and the chat online later on. Thanks everyone.